One question that I see asked all the time on social media or in people's live stream chats is whether or not it's possible to still get into Destiny in 2022, or if you're a player that hasn't played in a long time, should you come back? And I want to answer that question today because it's something that's been on my mind a little bit lately, especially with the state Destiny 2 has been in. So let's get into it. The first thing that I want to say is Destiny 2 is still a good game. I think it has a lot of problems and it's not in the best state right now, but it is still, at the end of the day, a good game at its core. There's a lot of content here. If you've never played Destiny 2 before or you haven't played in many years, there is going to be a lot of content for you. That doesn't mean necessarily that you should pick it up, but there is going to be enough content to keep you satisfied for at least a little bit. And obviously, again, there's hours and hours and hours of content. There's many challenges you can do. You can obviously, this can go as deep as you want it to. Destiny really can be, to a point anyway, as deep as you want it to go. You can make challenges to solo every raid in the game that's actually soloable. There's some that aren't, but for the most part, there's ways to kill most of the final bosses of raids solo, and you can set out to do things like that. Or it can be as simple as, I've never played through all of these campaigns, and maybe that's worth it. So it really depends on who you are, but I want to try to answer that question just kind of across the board. If you have never played Destiny before, this is the first thing that I have to say. Getting into Destiny 2 is very difficult, and the main reason for that is because there's no actual starting point. The Red War campaign was where Destiny started, where Destiny 2 started, rather, and it was removed from the game back in 2020. You can't actually play it anymore. You also can't experience Forsaken, which is, in my opinion, and I don't even know if it's debatable, the best expansion in the game. It's completely unplayable. Obviously, you can still go and play the raid and you can do the stuff on the Dreaming City, but the campaign is unplayable and most of the content associated with it is unplayable. So, it's kind of a difficult question to answer. You're given a quest, you're told to go to Earth, and you just kind of learn the game throughout a not great tutorial, I will say. And it's not a great onboarding experience, and it's the main reason why Destiny doesn't gain a lot of new players these days. Because it's just really difficult to stick with a game when you don't understand anything that's going on and no story is being presented to you in a coherent way. There's a timeline in the game that can tell you in what order things happen, and there's, YouTube videos and stuff of the cutscenes and playthroughs. But here's the thing, at the end of the day, this is an issue that Bungie created for themselves because, obviously, people want to play the game, right? It's a video game, it's not a movie. You don't get on a video game and say, yeah, I'm going to go to YouTube and try to fill in the missing pieces that this game didn't tell me about. But there are things about Destiny's story that are good, that are still in the game. I think the Witch Queen campaign is probably the best campaign, top to bottom, that Destiny has ever had. Final Shape is good. You can we can talk about how bad Edge of Fate is, but I don't think the campaign is the issue necessarily. The story, anyway, is not the issue. It's more so the expansion. But again, if we're talking about story, if you are a new player trying to get into Destiny 2 for the story, I have a really hard time recommending the game to you. I really do. I think there's enjoyable beats of the story. There are parts of it that are great, but the fact that you can't experience a great deal of it. Not even just because of the sunsetting from the campaigns, removing those campaigns from the game obviously hurts a lot, and that's a topic in and of itself that turns a lot of people off of Destiny in the first place, but also the seasonal content, right? Anything that's seasonal content that's been related to the story is no longer accessible. So you have no way of going back and learning about these things that you might want to learn about. Or rather, not even that you might want to learn about, but are important story beats, like the build up to Witch Queen, all of the stuff about, Osiris and everything like that is all just locked into story that is lost because of seasons that are not in the game anymore. So again, for that reason, it's really hard for me to recommend Destiny from a story standpoint. If you're trying to get into the game because you want to play a game with a great story, Destiny has really not ever been that, in my opinion. And I know that might be a controversial take, but I'm just being honest. Even when people have enjoyed Destiny stories in the past, outside of Witch Queen, like I said, and beats of Forsaken, not all of Forsaken necessarily, I think is some masterpiece, but specifically the Dreaming City side of Forsaken and stuff like that, I think is genuinely great. Some of the beats in Final Shape are genuinely great, but I've never really been a Destiny story guy. I think some of the lore is really interesting. But again, that's stuff that you kind of have to go out of your way to learn about in the first place. And obviously, with Destiny 2, a lot of the stuff that's been presented in the form of seasonal stuff was cool. But that's something that a new player can't experience. So I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to recommend if that's like the avenue that you would be interested in Destiny through. The next thing that I want to talk about is PvP, and that's if you were trying to get into Destiny 2 from the standpoint of someone who really enjoys PvP games. And I'm going to tell you a couple things right off the bat. Number one, Destiny has a cheating problem. It has a really bad cheating problem. If you play the game on PC, you're going to run into cheaters. That's all there is to it. It doesn't have a very great anti cheat. You're still going to play cheaters very often in the PC pool of the game. There is a split console and PC pool, so you won't match against console players unless they are playing with a friend that's on PC, and then in which case you could, I guess, but that's very rare. It doesn't happen very often at all. But I will say this, Destiny 2 PvP does not get very much support. There aren't very many new maps being added to it. In fact, the last time that a new map was added to it was 2024, and we went several years without getting a new Crucible map before that. So it's kind of hard for me to recommend from that standpoint too. There's not a lot of PvP content being filtered into the game. You've got Trials of Osiris and Iron Banner when they come around, and that's pretty much the extent of new Crucible loot that is actually, worth obtaining. So I mean, again, it's if you're like looking from it from the standpoint of a PvP player, it's kind of hard for me to recommend the game from that lens either. The problem with Destiny is that it's at its best when you're in the end game. Like the end game content, the raids and dungeons and stuff like that are the things that really hook you on Destiny, and that's always been the case, right? Back in Destiny 1 was not a complete game. It had a lot of issues. The story wasn't great, but it had a really good end game hook, and that's kind of still the experience that you get with Destiny. That's kind of like the appeal to it is the loot and the pursuit of these difficult things to get and going and doing these difficult things like these raids and dungeons and the challenge behind it. And Destiny 2 obviously is more of like it's not really so much about the chase of certain weapons and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's not a loot game, but it doesn't have the same level of RNG and stuff like that as a lot of loot shooters do. So it's more of kind of like a checklist kind of thing in a lot of ways. Like you need to go and beat this and all that stuff. So I mean, I'm not saying there's no RNG behind it, but it's definitely not as heavily a loot based game as Destiny 1 was. But anyway, where I'm going with all of this is obviously the raids and dungeons are arguably the best thing about Destiny, and anybody who's ever been deep into the weeds of Destiny will tell you that that's the kind of thing that makes it all worth it. Getting those experiences, getting to experience the raids and dungeons when they come out, and do the contest modes when those are around and stuff like that. That's what makes Destiny special at the end of the day, or at least a lot of what makes Destiny special. Not all of it, obviously, but a big chunk of that is just those experiences. So if that's something that interests you, I mean, and you go and you run a raid, and obviously like it's kind of difficult to get into a raid group these days, and Destiny's raid scene is not exactly in the best state. Obviously, I think that's something that's going to get better when we finally get the update in June. That's 3 months out. I know that's difficult to recommend, getting into a game for the future and stuff like that, and trying to tell people, oh yeah, it's going to get better. It's frustrating having to do that, but I will never have raids and dungeons listed in a negative light as far as Destiny overall and how I view Destiny. So I think raids and dungeons are a reason why you could want to get into Destiny. And to some extent, the reality of the situation is Destiny is never going to be a game for everyone, right? Bungie can try to make it that all they want, but all it's ever done is kind of divide the player base and not really satisfy anyone when they've tried to cater too hard to one side or the other. And to pivot to something else that I want to add, Destiny is a game that evolves a lot over time. It is a live service game. So there's a lot of times where I will be more willing to recommend Destiny, and there's going to be times where, Destiny really isn't in that great of a state. And that's just kind of the reality of a game like Destiny that has so many ups and downs. And that's not the case with all live service games, but it is very much the case with Destiny. There's a lot of different periods of time where you can say, yeah, Destiny's great right now. You should definitely get into it. And, you get to experience these cool things. And that's kind of the reality of Destiny at the end of the day. There's so many cool things about the game that you want to be there to experience in case something cool does happen or in case some new cool piece of content does get released. New raid, new dungeon, new cool activity. Like maybe it's like when Onslaught first released, Onslaught was really cool. Maybe Nether, something like that. Something along those lines that's really cool that gets people excited to play the game again. But going through the periods of time where nothing like that is happening in Destiny, and again, especially right now, because you could argue that Destiny is at the lowest point that it's ever been right now. So it's hard to recommend the game from that standpoint. But I still think that Destiny has a lot of magic to offer. And that's the unfortunate reality of it because it's a lot of magic that a ton of people are not going to be able to experience for a myriad of reasons, whether it be they have no interest in getting into the game because the story is incomplete. The PvP is a disaster these days and not really getting catered to. And and again, when there's so much uncertainty about the game and we're not getting the feedback loop that we should be getting from Bungie or the communication we should be getting from Bungie, it's hard to recommend the game, right? We're about to have 3 months of downtime. And on one hand, for anybody who does get into the game, that's a good time to go in and catch up. So, like, in that regard, it's not like it's too far gone for you to catch up. It's not like you'll never be caught up with Destiny. It's just for a lot of reasons, it's hard to recommend getting into the game in the first place to new players or people that are coming back that haven't played in a long time. Because when you go into Destiny, there's so many things that I feel like you need to understand about the game in order to be satisfied with it in the first place. And that's never a good thing. Like, you just want to get on and play the game. Like, the fact that I have to sit here and say, oh, yeah, you can't experience half of the game because it's been removed, or, oh, yeah, half of these activities are not exactly completely relevant anymore because of this new tiered loot system and all this stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just Bungie has created a really difficult situation where it's really hard to onboard new players to Destiny. And obviously, I want that experience to improve. And it's one of the main reasons why I feel like at this point we need a Destiny 3, or we need all of the content that was ever in Destiny 2 to be added back to the game. And that's an undertaking that I don't know that Bungie has the manpower to do. I'm probably of the opinion they don't right now, to be honest with you. And we need Destiny 3 because we need a place for people to start, obviously. You can obviously still go back and experience Destiny 1, and I'll have a separate video about that, whether or not Destiny 1 is worth getting into in 2026. And spoiler alert, I'm a lot more inclined to recommend Destiny 1 to people right now than I am Destiny 2 because it's just a game in a very weird state. Again, there's a lot of things in Destiny 2. There's years and years of content. There's hundreds of exotics in the game to go chase. In total, I think there's 18 raids and dungeons. There's a lot of Crucible maps to experience for the first time. There's many, many quests to experience. There's tons of things to do. But at the end of the day, it's still hard to recommend when there's no starting point. You know what I mean? And in closing, I just want to say this. Like, Destiny is truly a game that at its peak is one of the best games ever made, and I will stand by that forever, right? It's not always that way, obviously. There's a lot of bad experiences in Destiny. There's a lot of things that are not up to par. But when it is at its best, I have never played a game like Destiny. I'll put it like that. Destiny has accomplished things that no other loot shooter has actually been able to accomplish, like creating a really great endgame. And the thing is, Destiny is free to play, so I would say anybody that wants to try it and, play around with it can, but the free to play experience is very limiting and immediately you're going to feel like you need to spend money to keep going. So it's really hard for me to say, "Oh yeah, just go check it out and then make your own decisions if you want to buy it or not," because the reality is you're going to have to buy something if you want to get a good experience on Destiny 2, and I genuinely believe that. I don't think it's very easy at all to be a free to play player of this game. I mean, you do get access to some raids and dungeons, like a few, I think, but you would have to play a good chunk of the game through the free to play lens just to get to that point. And I don't know that you'll be able to stick with the game to the point where you're doing raids and dungeons if the experience of getting there in the first place is not good. But yeah, just to wrap this up, I think all in all, Destiny is a good game, but it's really hard for people to get into it initially. If you can get into Destiny, if you can stick through all of the problems with the game that basically make it difficult to get into in the first place, then you can have some really good experiences on it. It's a great game to play with friends. It's a great game to be there for the peaks of, but the valleys really suck sometimes, and that's just the reality and something you're going to have to accept. Destiny is not a perfect game. It has a ton of issues. That's just the reality. It's still one of my favorite games ever made, and I would love for people to get into it. I would love for people to try it, and I think there's magical experiences that you cannot get in any other game than Destiny, but it's still hard to recommend. And that's, at the end of the day, the reason why I have to just say, if you're interested in playing Destiny, maybe give it a try. The DLCs go on sale a lot. Maybe you'll be able to get a good deal on them. You can get some of them on sale for like $10 or less, and maybe you'll get hooked. Maybe you'll fall in love with the game, and during this downtime, you have a lot of time to catch up and do all the stuff you haven't done. So in that regard, maybe it could be something for people to check out. I'm not going to tell you one way or the other. I'm just saying I've listed out a lot of the facts about Destiny and a lot of the reasons why it struggles to capture new players and a lot of the reasons why new players could be interested in sticking with Destiny. It's a game that has ups and downs. Like I said before, it's a game that's going to change, and maybe you want to be there for the times where it's better. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time.